Clara Bennett had always been the kind of woman people in her small Alabama town admired. She was a pastor's wife, the model of devotion, grace, and discipline. Every Sunday morning, she walked hand in hand with Reverend Samuel Bennett to the little white church on Elm Street. The congregation whispered about how blessed they were to have such a godly couple. To everyone else, they were the living picture of faith and stability. But inside their two-story brick house across from the churchyard, the silence was deafening. For years, Clara had lived her life by a script that wasn't hers. Her days followed a rhythm of obedience. Morning prayers with her husband, preparing breakfast in the same blue china set Samuel's mother had gifted them, visiting parishioners, then returning home to tidy the house before evening service. There was comfort in the routine, but also something hollow. Samuel rarely looked at her, except when he needed her to set the hymn schedule or prepare the church bulletins. He spoke to her like he spoke from the pulpit, calm, righteous, and distant. To him, she was a partner in ministry, not a woman with her own heart and hunger. Even their nights together felt like duty. After prayer, the lights went off, and Samuel would murmur something about purity and rest. Clara would lie awake, staring at the dark ceiling, wondering if marriage was supposed to feel this lonely. She tried to convince herself that her emptiness was a test from God, that true faith meant endurance. But deep down, she feared that her prayers were going unheard. In the church, people sought her advice, calling her Sister Clara. They imagined she carried the same peace that glowed on her husband's face when he preached about righteousness. No one knew that behind her gentle smile, she felt like a ghost inside her own home. Sometimes, as she ironed Samuel's white shirts, she would watch him through the reflection in the hallway mirror, his broad back, his tidy hair, the way he never once turned around to meet her eyes. He had become married to the church, not to her. On afternoons when the town quieted and the cicadas hummed, Clara would sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching life pass by. Children rode bikes down the street, young couples laughed on their porches, and she would think, when did I stop being part of the world? Even her friends had faded away. Samuel preferred her to keep a small circle, avoiding gossip and temptation. He said it was better for a pastor's wife to live humbly. So she did, so much that she had forgotten what her own voice sounded like when she wasn't quoting scripture. But the silence was growing heavier. It had weight. She began to notice tiny cracks in her faith, little moments when she questioned whether love and holiness could ever live under the same roof. Her mother's voice echoed from her childhood. A good wife endures. A good Christian obeys. And so Clara endured. Every Sunday, she stood by her husband's side as he preached about sin and salvation, her eyes lowered, her hands folded neatly. The sunlight through the stained glass windows painted her face in colors of devotion. But inside, she was crumbling. When Samuel spoke about forgiveness, she thought about her own heart, how much she had sacrificed, how little she received in return. One evening, after choir practice, Samuel asked her to stay and tidy up the pews. He didn't say thank you. He never did. He simply said, "Remember, Clara, a wife's strength lies in her quiet obedience." She nodded, as she always did, her throat tight. When he left, she sat alone in the empty church, staring at the cross above the altar. The candles flickered softly, and for the first time, she didn't pray. She just sat there motionless, wondering what God thought of her silence. Outside, the night air was cool. She walked home past the rows of houses, the same path she'd taken 1,000 times. The porch lights were glowing. The sound of laughter drifted from open windows, and it struck her how foreign joy had become. Inside the Bennett home, everything was in order. Bible verses framed on the walls, the faint smell of lavender polish, the ticking of the grandfather clock that never stopped. Samuel was already in his study, writing notes for Sunday's sermon about the dangers of temptation. His pen scratched the paper rhythmically, a sound that somehow made the loneliness sharper. Clara stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him. "Do you need anything before I go to bed?" she asked softly. He didn't look up. "Just peace and quiet, my dear. The Lord is speaking to me tonight." She smiled faintly, though her chest ached. "Of course." in their bedroom. She brushed her hair and caught her own reflection in the mirror, pale, tired eyes staring back. She whispered to herself, "This is my cross to bear." Then she climbed into bed alone, even though her husband slept in the next room. Somewhere outside, the wind carried the faint sound of laughter from a neighbor's porch. It reminded her of a life she had never lived, a life full of color, warmth, and touch. She turned off the lamp, her heart sinking into the darkness. Clara didn't know it yet, but this quiet ache, this longing for something beyond duty, was about to awaken a fire she would never be able to put out. It was late June when the moving truck pulled up to the small yellow house across the street. The Bennett's neighborhood, usually so still that even the sound of a lawnmower drew curious glances, came alive with whispers at afternoon. Curtains shifted. Neighbors peeked through blinds. A new family was moving in, a rare event in a town where most folks have been born, married, and buried within the same 10-mile radius. Clara watched from the kitchen window as a tall man stepped out of the truck. His skin was a warm bronze tone that caught the sun, his posture confident but gentle. He laughed as he lifted a box marked kitchen, his voice smooth, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Behind him followed a woman, in a soft beige headscarf, guiding two small children holding toy cars. They looked polite, careful, like people trying not to disturb a world that might not welcome them. When Reverend Samuel came home for lunch, Clara mentioned it casually. New family across the street moved in today. He didn't look up from his sandwich. We'll have to invite them to church. New souls need guidance. Clara nodded, though something in her chest stirred when she thought of the man's easy smile. She didn't even know his name yet. That evening, as the sun lowered behind the trees, she saw him again. He stood on the front porch tightening a light bulb, sleeves rolled up, the air golden around him. She hesitated, then walked over with a pie, blueberry, her default offering for new neighbors. "Hi," she began, her voice a touch too careful. "I'm Clara Bennett. My husband pastors the church right down the street. Welcome to our neighborhood." The man smiled, setting down the screwdriver. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Bennett. I'm Amir Rahman. This is my wife, Layla." Layla appeared in the doorway, graceful but reserved. Her smile was polite, not warm. Clara recognized that kind of guarded courtesy. She'd used it herself at countless church events. Amir's handshake was firm, his eyes bright with curiosity. "Thank you for this. It smells wonderful. My mother used to make pies when we lived in Texas, but never this kind. She'd be jealous." Clara laughed softly, surprised by how natural it felt. For a brief moment, she forgot to feel awkward. There was something disarming about him, an openness that contrasted the formal restraint she lived with every day. Over the next few weeks, Clara saw him often, sometimes at the grocery store, sometimes walking his kids to school, always greeting her with that same warm expression. Each encounter was short, but lingered in her mind longer than it should have. She tried to ignore it, tried to tell herself she was simply being neighborly, but she caught herself looking out the window more often than usual. One morning, as she walked her golden retriever, she found Amir sitting on a bench at the small park nearby, reading a book. When he looked up, his face lit with recognition. "Good morning, Mrs. Bennett." "Good morning, Mr. Rahman. You're up early." He chuckled. "Old habit. Morning is the only time I can read before work gets too noisy." They talked about small things, the weather, the kids in the neighborhood, how quiet the town was. Yet beneath the conversation, an undercurrent hummed, something she didn't want to name. When she returned home, her heart still beat a little faster. Samuel noticed nothing. He rarely did. His sermons were his world. His wife merely kept it running smoothly. By August, the Rahmans had blended quietly into town life. Amir opened a small repair shop 2 blocks away and quickly earned a reputation as reliable and kind. Layla joined the PDA, but kept mostly to herself. People in town still whispered, "They're Muslim, you know?" Some said it with curiosity, others with quiet suspicion. But no one could say a bad word about them. For Clara, their presence brought something unexpected. It was as if color had returned to a black and white world. She began taking longer walks, timing them so she might accidentally pass by the Rahman house. She told herself it was harmless. She just enjoyed the company. One afternoon, Amir stopped by with a basket of lemons from his backyard. "Layla makes tea with these," he said. "I thought you might like some." "Thank you," Clara replied, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "That's very thoughtful." Their hands brushed for half a second as she took the basket, and it startled her how warm his skin felt, how alive she suddenly became. She smiled too quickly, retreating inside before Samuel returned home. That night, she couldn't sleep. She replayed the brief moment again and again, the way his eyes had met hers, gentle, respectful, yet filled with something she couldn't quite name. For the first time in years, she felt visible. In a town ruled by sermons and silence, Clara Bennett had finally met someone who saw her not as a pastor's wife, but as a woman, and that realization would soon unravel everything she thought she believed. It began innocently, or at least that's what Clara kept telling herself. A wave from across the street, a smile exchanged at the grocery store, a brief chat about the weather while she watered her garden. But beneath every ordinary word lay something trembling, alive, a quiet electricity that both thrilled and frightened her. Amir Rahman had a way of listening that made the world fall away. When Clara spoke, he looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her, as though what she said mattered. She had almost forgotten what that felt like. In her marriage, conversations had become one-sided sermons, moments of polite silence where love was replaced by obedience. But with Amir, even silence had a pulse. Sometimes they crossed paths at the park, as if by coincidence. He'd be sitting on that same wooden bench, a book in his hands, a faint smile on his lips. Clara would slow her steps, pretending to adjust her dog's leash or check her phone, until he looked up. Then she'd feel that familiar spark, the one that made her heart stumble in her chest. "Morning, Mrs. Bennett," he would say, his tone soft, teasingly formal. "Morning, Mr. Rahman," she'd reply, unable to hide her smile. Their talk stretched longer each time. What started with harmless small talk soon deepened into something else, something dangerous. He spoke about his life in Karachi, about moving to America, and the feeling of always being watched, of never truly belonging. Clara told him about her childhood in a small Christian family, where sin was a word whispered like a curse. "You ever feel like people only see what they want to see?" he asked one afternoon. Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Every single day." The way he said her name, Clara, felt different. It wasn't a command or sermon. It was soft, human, tender. She began to crave it. At home, she grew restless. Every time she heard footsteps outside, she peeked through the curtains, hoping it was Amir. When he wasn't there, she felt hollow. Her husband Samuel didn't notice the change, or chose not to. He was consumed with writing his next sermon, guarding against temptation. Irony, she thought bitterly, pressing her palms together in forced prayer. Weeks turned into months. One day, after a church event, Clara stayed behind to clean the pews. Amir happened to pass by on his way home from work. Seeing her inside, he stopped at the open door. "Working late, Mrs. Bennett?" he said, smiling. She jumped slightly, embarrassed to be caught humming an old love song under her breath. "Just tidying up before Sunday." He stepped closer. The air shifted. The smell of rain clung to his clothes. For a heartbeat, they stood in silence. Two people from worlds that should never have touched. "You don't have to call me Mrs. Bennett," she said quietly. "Just Clara." Something unspoken passed between them, heavy and dangerous. That night, she dreamt of his hand brushing hers, and when she woke, guilt burned hotter than desire. She knelt beside the bed, whispering prayers she didn't mean. But even in prayer, she saw his face. Soon, they began meeting intentionally. It wasn't planned, not at first, but temptation rarely announces itself. A walk here, a coffee there. Their boundaries blurred until they were gone. Amir spoke of faith. How he respected hers, though he followed another path. Clara told him she'd always wondered what love outside rules would feel like. He laughed gently. Maybe love is the only thing not meant to be ruled. That sentence lodged itself in her chest like a secret flame. One afternoon, While Samuel was away at a regional pastors' meeting, Amir offered to help Clara fix a broken garden gate. The sky was gray, the air thick with humidity. As he worked, she brought him lemonade. Their eyes met over the glass. He reached to take it, and their fingers brushed. Neither of them moved. A second passed, then two. The tension snapped like a string pulled too tight. Amir leaned in first, his breath warm against her cheek. She didn't pull away. Their kiss was hesitant, trembling, the kind of kiss that feels both holy and profane. When it ended, Clara stepped back, her hands shaking. "We shouldn't," she whispered. "I know," he said softly, "but I can't help it." She wanted to run, to fall to her knees and repent. Instead, she let him hold her. For the first time in years, she felt alive, frighteningly, blissfully alive. That night, she couldn't look at her husband. She served dinner, listened to him talk about church renovations, nodded at the right moments. But her mind was somewhere else. On the scent of Amir's skin, the heat of his hands, the way guilt now pulsed through her veins like fire. In her journal, she wrote, "I broke the vow I made before God, but for one stolen hour, I felt heaven touch earth." She closed the notebook and pressed it to her chest, tears spilling down her face. Outside, the crickets sang their restless hymn. Inside, Clara Bennett, the pastor's perfect wife, had begun her descent into sin. The first time Clara crossed the line completely, the world seemed to stop. It was a Tuesday afternoon, hot and heavy with the kind of southern humidity that clings to your skin. Reverend Samuel was away for 3 days at church conference in Mobile. The house felt larger, emptier, too quiet to bear. When Amir texted to say he had the afternoon off, her fingers hovered over the phone far too long before she typed back, "Come by. I baked too much pie." They both knew it wasn't about pie. When he arrived, he stood at the doorway with that careful smile, the kind that tried to hide everything and revealed even more. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he stepped inside and the air changed. The faint hum of the ceiling fan, the ticking of the kitchen clock, even the cicadas outside faded into silence. She handed him a plate, their fingers brushing again. This time, she didn't pull away. "Clara," he began, his voice quiet but unsteady. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't say my name like that unless you mean it." He set the plate down and took a step closer. Their bodies seemed to recognize what their minds were still denying. The next moments felt like falling, slow, inevitable, unstoppable. His hands found hers, trembling but sure, and when he kissed her, she forgot the sound of her own fear. Afterward, they sat in silence on the couch, sunlight cutting through the blinds in thin, golden lines. Clara stared at the window, her chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. Guilt hit her like a wave, but beneath it was something fiercer, freedom. For years she had lived untouched, unseen, unloved. Now, for the first time, she had been seen. Amir broke the silence. "We shouldn't do this again," he said softly, but even he didn't sound convinced. "I know," Clara replied, her voice trembling, "but I don't think I can stop." And they didn't. The weeks that followed blurred into a series of stolen moments. Whispered phone calls, glances across the street, secret meetings that burned brighter with every lie they told. They met in the back seat of his truck under the canopy of trees near the old county line road. They met at a roadside motel with flickering neon lights, where no one knew their names. Each time, she swore it would be the last. Each time it wasn't. She started wearing perfume again, something floral and sweet. She bought a red dress she never wore to church. She told herself it was harmless, but even her prayers began to sound like confessions. In Amir's arms, Clara felt reborn. He was gentle where Samuel was rigid, curious where her husband was cold. He traced the lines on her palms and said softly, "You've carried too much for too long." When he said he admired her strength, she almost laughed. If only he knew how weak she felt. But love, or what felt like it, made weakness feel holy. Their passion grew reckless. One evening, during a community barbecue at the park, they could barely look at each other without giving themselves away. Amir was at the grill, smiling at jokes, while Layla stood nearby with their children. Clara brought a tray of salad, pretending to focus on small talk. But when their eyes met across the crowd, a shock passed through her so strong she had to turn away. Layla noticed. She said nothing, but her eyes lingered too long on her husband's distracted face. Later that night, when the Ramons walked home, Layla asked quietly, "Is there something you want to tell me?" Amir lied. "No." But the lies settled between them like smoke. At home, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood by the window, watching the Ramons' porch light flicker out. Her reflection stared back. Flushed cheeks, trembling hands, a woman she no longer recognized. She pressed a palm against the glass and whispered, "What have I done?" The next day, she went to confession. She didn't mention names, only a temptation I can't escape. The church elder smiled kindly and said, "Pray harder, sister. The devil preys on the lonely." That night, she prayed, not to resist sin, but to understand why love could feel so wrong and still so right. A few days later, Amir sent her a message. "Meet me outside town." Same place as before. She didn't reply, but when the time came, she was there. The sun had set, the air thick with the smell of pine and earth. They didn't speak. He reached for her, and she melted into his touch as though the entire world had narrowed to that single heartbeat. When it was over, they lay side by side on the blanket. They always kept hidden there, listening to the distant hum of traffic. Clara turned to him and whispered, "Do you ever think about what happens when someone finds out?" Amir looked up at the stars, his expression unreadable. "I think about it every day," he said. "And yet here I am." She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady, human, fragile. Neither of them noticed the sound of footsteps far away, or the flicker of movement between the trees. They had no idea that someone else had already started to notice their secret, and that the flame they had lit would soon burn everything in its path. Approach of something inevitable. Clara Bennett stood at her bedroom window, staring at the streetlights flickering to life one by one. Every gust of wind bent the trees until their branches scraped against the glass. The air was restless, heavy with rain and electricity, and something inside her matched its turmoil. For 3 days, she hadn't seen Amir. After their last meeting in that abandoned lot, he'd grown distant, his messages shorter, his tone uncertain. She told herself he needed space, but deep down, she feared he was finally trying to end it, and she couldn't bear the thought. Her husband was downstairs reading scripture aloud to himself, the same rhythmic drone that filled every night of their marriage. She felt trapped between two lives, the one that was killing her slowly and the one that burned too brightly to last. Lightning flashed, painting the sky white for a moment. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Amir, "Can we talk?" One last time. Her breath caught. She typed back before her mind could stop her. Where? The construction site, outside town, before the storm gets worse. It was the same place they met so many times before, hidden behind stacks of lumber and half-built walls, far from curious eyes. She didn't even grab a coat, just her car keys and scarf. The rain began to fall as she drove, fat drops thudding against the windshield like warnings. When she arrived, Amir was already there, standing near one of the unfinished buildings. His shirt clung to his skin, soaked through, and his face looked drawn, tired. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain drummed on the tin roof above them. "I shouldn't have called you," he said finally, voice rough. "We've gone too far, Clara." She took a step forward, heart pounding. "You can't just disappear, Amir. Not after everything." He shook his head. "Someone's going to find out. Layla's been watching me. And your husband, he's not blind, Clara. He'll know." Her chest tightened. "Then what do we do?" He looked at her, eyes soft with something that felt like sorrow. "We end it." The words sliced through her like glass. "You don't mean that." "I do." He reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. "You've been my light in the dark, but this will destroy us both." Tears mixed with rain as she shook her head. "It's already destroyed me." Amir's voice faltered. "Please go home. Forget me. Pray for forgiveness." But she couldn't move. Instead, she reached for him, desperate. Their hands met, and for one fleeting second, the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. Then he pulled away. When she finally drove off, she didn't look back. The rain came harder, swallowing the headlights in sheets of silver. She gripped the wheel, trembling, whispering prayers she no longer believed. Hours later, near midnight, the storm reached its peak. Thunder rattled the windows of the Bennett house as Samuel continued to write in his study. Clara was sitting on the edge of her bed when a scream pierced through the sound of rain. She froze. Then came another, faint, terrified, from somewhere outside. She rushed to the window and peered out, but the darkness was almost absolute. Lightning flashed again, just long enough for her to see people gathering near the street. A figure was lying motionless on the wet pavement. Her breath hitched. She knew that outline, that shape, that stillness. Moments later, frantic knocking shook her door. It was Alice from next door, her face pale and wet from the rain. "Clara! Oh, Lord! Amir Rahman, he's dead." The words didn't register. Clara felt her knees give out. Somewhere far away, Samuel's voice asked what was happening, but it sounded muffled, like through water. She stumbled outside barefoot, joining the growing crowd. The wind whipped her hair across her face as she saw the paramedics kneeling over Amir's lifeless body. No blood, no wound, just death. Layla stood nearby, screaming, her voice raw and hollow. The children clung to her skirt, crying. Clara could barely breathe. The world around her blurred. Sirens, lightning, whispers. She wanted to run to him, to scream his name, but she couldn't move. The thunder cracked above, shaking the street. Rain poured harder, as if the heavens themselves were weeping. And in that storm, under the flickering streetlight, Clara Bennett realized the affair she thought was her salvation had just become her damnation. The morning after the storm, the entire town of Fairview was buzzing. The death of Amir Rahman spread faster than the thunder that had rolled across the skies hours earlier. Neighbors whispered in the aisles of the grocery store. Church members gathered on porches, and speculation swirled like wildfire. Some said it was a heart attack. Others claimed lightning struck near him. But everyone agreed on one thing. Something about it didn't feel natural. Clara awoke to the sound of murmurs outside her window. Through the blinds, she saw police cars parked across the street, yellow tape fluttering in the wind around the Rahman property. She pulled the curtain closed and leaned her forehead against the wall, trying to breathe. Her body still trembled from the night before. Amir's face kept replaying in her mind. That last moment they shared in the rain, his voice, his touch, and then the image of him lying lifeless on the ground. Downstairs, Reverend Samuel was already dressed in his pressed black suit. His Bible sat open on the table, untouched. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he murmured, sipping his coffee. "That poor man. I didn't know him well, but his family must be devastated." Clara's hands shook as she set a cup on the counter. "Yes," she whispered, devastated. He looked up for the first time, narrowing his eyes. "You look pale. You should rest." "I will." She forced a smile, but her voice cracked. Outside, the investigation had already begun. Detective Howard Lang, a calm but sharp-eyed investigator from Mobile, and his partner Detective Teresa Monroe, known for her empathy and persistence, had been called to assist the local sheriff. They stood over the spot where Amir's body had been found. Rainwater still pooled in the cracks of the street. "No signs of trauma," Lang muttered, crouching. "No blood, no wounds, nothing external." Monroe scanned the area. Neighbors said he screamed. If it was natural, someone would have heard him fall, not scream. And it wasn't lightning, no burn marks, no signs of a strike. Lang nodded. "Let's get a tox screen. Something doesn't add up." By afternoon, the detectives were knocking on doors. The Rahman home was first. Layla opened the door, her eyes swollen from crying, a scarf loosely draped over her shoulders. The children were in the other room, silent, their small faces pale with confusion. "We're sorry for your loss, Mrs. Rahman," Detective Monroe said gently. "We just need to ask a few questions to understand what happened." Layla nodded faintly, her fingers twisting the fabric of her scarf. "He went out during the storm. I told him to stay in, but he said he needed air." Then Her voice broke. Then they said he was lying in the street. Lang studied her. Was he sick recently? On any medication? No. He was healthy. Maybe a bit tired lately, but nothing serious. Was there anyone he was in conflict with? She hesitated. No. Everyone liked him. Her eyes flickered downward. At least I thought so. The detectives exchanged glances, but didn't press. They offered condolences and left. Next, they crossed the street to the Bennetts. Clara nearly dropped the dish towel when she opened the door and saw the badges. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Lang said politely. "We're investigating the death of your neighbor, Mr. Rahman. We understand you may have spoken with him from time to time." Clara nodded, her throat dry. "Yes, of course. We talked occasionally, mostly about the neighborhood, gardening, things like that. I can't believe he's gone." "Did you see him yesterday evening?" Monroe asked, eyes steady but kind. Clara hesitated a fraction too long. "No, I was home all night. My husband was here too." Lang took a slow note. "You didn't hear anything during the storm?" "Only thunder," she said quickly. "It was terrible. I couldn't sleep." The detectives thanked her and left, but not before Monroe caught the tremor in Clara's voice, the way her eyes darted toward the floor each time Amir's name was mentioned. Later that day, toxicology results came back. The cause of death: poison, a slow-acting, rare compound that could mimic cardiac arrest. Lang whistled low as he read the report. So this wasn't nature's doing. Monroe frowned. "We've got a murderer." They returned to the Rahman home, warrant in hand. As they searched, Lang noticed how spotless the kitchen was. Too spotless. Behind a row of cereal boxes, he found a small unlabeled bottle. The liquid inside was pale and viscous. "What's this?" he asked, holding it up. Layla's face went white. "I don't know. Maybe something Amir brought from the shop. Cleaning supplies, maybe." Monroe took it carefully. "We'll send it for testing." While they waited for the lab results, the detectives dug deeper into Amir's life. His co-workers described him as polite, but distracted lately. His phone records showed frequent calls to one number, the Bennett's landline. Lang raised an eyebrow. Odd for a married man to be chatting with a pastor's wife that often. Monroe's tone softened. "Let's not jump to conclusions yet. Could have been about neighborhood matters. Maybe, but Lang's gut told him otherwise. 2 days later, the lab confirmed the substance in the bottle was the same poison found in Amir's bloodstream. It was enough evidence to arrest Layla Rahman. When the officers arrived, she didn't fight. Her hands trembled as they cuffed her. Her eyes were hollow, as if she'd been waiting for this. At the station, under the harsh light of the interrogation room, Lang leaned forward. "We know you bought that chemical online 3 weeks ago. We know it killed your husband. Tell us why, Mrs. Rahman." For a long time, Layla said nothing. Then tears slid down her cheeks. "He wasn't the same man anymore. He lied to me. He'd come home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine." Her voice broke. He was seeing her. "Who?" Lang asked. Layla's lips trembled. "The pastor's wife, Clara Bennett." Lang and Monroe exchanged a sharp glance. "You're certain?" Layla nodded through her tears. "I saw them. In the park. I saw the way he looked at her. I confronted him. He denied it, but I knew." Her confession spilled out like a flood: jealousy, heartbreak, rage. "I didn't mean to kill him," she sobbed. "I just wanted him to hurt the way I did." As the detective stepped out of the room, Monroe whispered, "That explains motive, but it also means this case isn't just about jealousy. It's about exposure." Lang nodded grimly. "And I think the Bennetts are about to find out what judgment really feels like." That evening, as Layla was led away in handcuffs, neighbors gathered outside again, their faces pale in the orange glow of streetlights. When Layla saw Clara standing on her porch, she froze, fury and despair twisting her expression. "You!" she screamed, her voice echoing down the street. "You took him from me. You killed him as much as I did." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Samuel stepped outside, confusion turning to horror as the meaning sank in. Clara stood still, her face drained of color. The storm may have passed, but the reckoning had only just begun. The evening air was thick with humidity and whispers. Blue light still pulsed down the street as neighbors gathered in clumps, clutching their robes and umbrellas. The moment Layla Ramon's scream pierced the air, "You took him from me! You killed him as much as I did." Something inside Clara Bennett shattered. For a few seconds, the world froze. Reverend Samuel turned toward his wife, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if the words hadn't yet reached his soul. But when they did, his face darkened, every trace of gentleness wiped away. Clara couldn't look at him. She felt the ground sway beneath her feet, the murmurs of the crowd rising like waves. Officers pushed Layla toward the patrol car, but she fought them, tears streaking down her face. She seduced him. "She destroyed my family," she shouted again, pointing directly at Clara. "Ask her where she was that night. Ask her what she was doing while my husband was dying." Detective Monroe quickly intervened, her voice firm but steady. "That's enough, Mrs. Ramon." But it was too late. The truth had already ignited like dry kindling in the rain-soaked street. Samuel's voice was a low growl when he spoke. "Is it true?" Clara's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her hands shook violently, and her throat felt as if it were closing. The faces of her neighbors blurred. People she'd prayed with, hosted dinners for, people who had once called her sister Clara. Samuel stepped closer. "Answer me." "Inside," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, not here." He turned sharply and walked toward the house without another word. The crowd parted in silence, their judgment thick as the air after the storm. Clara followed him, her shoes squelching against the wet pavement. The door slammed behind them. The ticking of the grandfather clock was the only sound. Samuel stood with his back to her, his shoulders rigid, his hand gripping the edge of the table. "Tell me it's a lie," he said quietly. "Tell me this is another one of their sick rumors." Clara's lips trembled. "I can't." His hand slammed against the table, the sound echoing through the house. "How long?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Months." He turned, his face twisted with fury and disbelief. "Months?" While I preached about fidelity, about sin, my own wife, he stopped, breathing heavily, eyes glistening with rage. "With him? A married man?" She flinched at the venom in his voice. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Samuel. I was lonely." "You! Don't you dare blame me for your sin," he roared, the veins in his neck straining. "I gave you everything. A home, a purpose, respect in this community." Clara's voice cracked. "You gave me a cage." He froze, staring at her as though seeing her for the first time. "A cage?" "I tried to be the wife you wanted," she said, sobbing now. "The quiet one, the obedient one. But I was dying inside. And when he saw me, really saw me, I didn't know how to stop." Samuel's face twisted with pain and disbelief. "So you open your heart and your bed to another man? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To this church?" Her voice fell to a whisper. "Yes, I know." The silence that followed was unbearable. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a reminder of the night that had started it all. Samuel stepped back, shaking his head. "You destroyed everything," he said, quieter now, but more dangerous in tone. "My ministry, my faith, my name." Clara pressed her palms together, as if praying. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. I loved him, but I loved God too. I thought I could carry both. I was wrong." Samuel turned away, his shoulders trembling. "You were my wife," he said softly. "The one person I trusted above all else." Then his voice hardened again. "I stood at the pulpit and preached about sin, and the devil was sleeping under my own roof." Clara fell to her knees, sobbing. "Please, Samuel." He cut her off. "Don't. You've already confessed. There's nothing left to say." He moved toward the door, grabbing his coat. "Where are you going?" she cried. "Anywhere but here." His hand paused on the doorknob. "You've made your bed, Clara. Now you can lie in it." The door slammed, and she was alone. For a long time, she sat motionless on the cold floor, her sobs fading into silence. Through the window, she could still see the flashing lights outside as the police car drove away with Layla Rahman inside. Clara wondered which of them was being punished more, the woman in handcuffs or the one left behind to drown in her own guilt. Hours passed before she finally stood. The mirror above the mantel caught her reflection. Pale, hollow, her hair clinging to her tear-streaked face. She barely recognized herself. She whispered into the emptiness, "Forgive me, Lord, or forget me completely." But the house stayed silent. And somewhere down the street, a church bell tolled midnight, solemn, distant, final. The next 2 days passed in a fog of whispers, pity, and silence. The news of the pastor's wife and her affair spread through Fairview like wildfire through dry brush. By Sunday morning, the little white church on Elm Street was filled not with songs of praise, but with murmured gossip and sideways glances. Every pew that once held admiration for the Bennetts now carried a mix of curiosity and judgment. Clara stayed inside, curtains drawn, unable to face the congregation. From her window, she could see the church she'd once considered a second home. Its white steeple rose into the gray morning sky, as if pointing toward a heaven that had long stopped listening. The air felt thick with humiliation. She could still hear Samuel's words echoing in her head. "You destroyed everything." He hadn't come home since that night. Someone said they saw him checking into a motel near the interstate, though Clara didn't believe it first. He'd always preached that running from sin was cowardice, but maybe now he understood what true shame felt like. She wondered if he hated her more for the affair or for exposing the cracks in his perfect world. The first night without him, the house seemed to collapse inward. Every clock ticked too loud. The floorboards creaked like whispers of accusation. Clara spent the night pacing, praying, crying, then praying again, though even her prayers sounded hollow. She couldn't decide who she was pleading to, God, Amir, or the part of herself she'd lost long ago. By morning, her reflection startled her. The woman in the mirror wasn't the polished pastor's wife anymore. She was hollow-eyed, hair tangled, a ghost of who she used to be. On the dresser sat the Bible Samuel had given her on their wedding day. "For my beloved Clara, may your faith guide you always." She opened it and found his old sermon notes tucked inside. Temptation is not the whisper of the devil. It's the echo of what we already desire. She closed it slowly, her hands trembling. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world hadn't brightened. The Rahman house stood quiet now, shades drawn, cars gone. Layla was in custody. The children had been taken by her sister in Montgomery. Amir's funeral was scheduled for next afternoon, and though every fiber of Clara's being ached to go, she knew she couldn't. She wasn't welcome. That night, Detective Monroe came by. She stood on the porch, hat in hand, her expression gentler than Clara expected. "I won't keep you long," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know the case is closed." Mrs. Rahman confessed completely. She said she poisoned her husband out of jealousy. She's devastated, but she's cooperating. Clara nodded numbly. "So that's it then?" Monroe hesitated. "That's it. But I'll be honest, a lot of folks are talking. You might want to stay with family for a while." "I don't have anyone," Clara whispered. The detective's gaze softened. "Then take care of yourself. Grief makes people say cruel things." After Monroe left, Clara locked the door and sank onto the floor, her back against the wall. Grief. The word lingered in her mind. But what was she grieving? The man she loved? The faith she'd lost? The life that had never truly belonged to her? Maybe all of it. The following day, the church bells tolled at noon for Amir's funeral. Clara listened from her window, tears streaking her face. She imagined the mourners, Layla's relatives, co-workers, the few neighbors who dared to attend. She pictured the casket lowered into the ground, the earth closing over him. Her heart clenched. She wanted to scream, to run to the churchyard, to throw herself onto that grave and tell the world that she loved him, that he hadn't just been a sin, that for a moment he had made her feel alive. But all she could do was stand there and cry silently, the sound lost in the wind. That evening, Samuel came home. The door opened quietly, but the sound of his footsteps was enough to make Clara freeze. She turned to see him in the doorway, his suit wrinkled, eyes sunken, Bible still clutched in his hand. I came for my things, he said flatly. She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. The closet's still yours. He moved past her, gathering his clothes in silence. For a long time, neither spoke. Then he stopped near the doorway. They asked me to step down from the pulpit, he said bitterly, until the church sorts things out. Imagine that. 20 years of service, gone because of your weakness. I'm sorry, she whispered. More than you'll ever know. He looked at her then, and for a fleeting second, beneath the anger, she thought she saw sorrow. You took everything that mattered to me, he said quietly. And yet, I still prayed for you last night. Her breath caught. You prayed for me? He nodded. For your soul. Because I don't think you'll ever forgive yourself. Then he left. The sound of the door closing felt final, heavier than any sermon he'd ever preached. That night, Clara wrote a letter. Her handwriting shook, but she took her time, pressing hard against the paper as though carving the words into existence. To whoever finds this, I am not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I thought love was a gift from God, but I learned it can be a test, one I failed. I have lived a life of silence, and when I finally spoke, it was through sin. I loved a man I wasn't supposed to love, and I lost everything for it. Maybe that's justice. Maybe that's mercy. I just wanted to stop hurting. Clara Bennett. She folded the letter neatly and placed it on the nightstand beside her wedding Bible. Outside, the wind began to rise again. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faintly, though the sky was clear. The house creaked softly, as if exhaling. When the neighbors found her the next morning, she was lying peacefully on her bed, dressed in her Sunday best, her hair brushed neatly, the Bible resting on her chest. The bottle of sleeping pills sat open beside her. The letter was folded beneath her hand. At the funeral, Reverend Samuel stood before a small crowd, his face pale but resolute. He read from Psalms, his voice steady but heavy with grief. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Few dared meet his eyes. No one mentioned the scandal. The town would go on pretending it was just another tragedy, a woman overcome by guilt, a family torn apart. Afterward, Detective Monroe lingered by the grave, watching the pastor walk away alone. What a waste, she murmured. All because people forgot how to be kind. Lang, standing beside her, nodded. Or maybe because they forgot how to forgive. As the crowd dispersed, a soft breeze rustled through the trees. A single page from Clara's letter slipped free, fluttering against the grass. The last line was visible, ink blurred but still legible. I didn't die for love. I died because love showed me the truth, and the truth was unbearable. And as the sun dipped behind the steeple, the town of Fairview fell silent again, a place where faith, passion, and guilt had collided, leaving only echoes of two souls who wanted nothing more than to be seen.